In this video, I'm going to discuss about coastal landforms. So, before understanding going to the coastal landforms, let us understand some terminologies of sea coast and seashore. Seashore, it is a zone of land between the high tide water. So, high tide, suppose high tide water is reaching here, the water is reaching till here, the high tide water is reaching here, and this zone. So, between the zone between the high tide water and the low tide water, this zone of land is called seashore. And shoreline, it is the actual landward limit of sea water at the given moment of time. So shoreline changes according to the time and depending upon the waves or tide position of the waves and tidal water. So depending upon the position of this, so the shoreline changes. So it changes between, so at times it changes whenever depending upon the influence of the tides and waves. So this is depending upon the water movement influenced by tides and waves. Sea coast, it is the land zone immediately behind the cliff. So suppose this is the cliff zone. So this zone is called sea coast. So immediately behind the cliff, this zone is called sea coast. And coastal line, it is a margin of land rising above the sea water. So coast and shore, so in this we can see this is the shoreline because it changes. So from the back shore to offshore, it changes depending upon this. Suppose it is a low tide water, then shoreline will be here. Suppose this is the high tide water, then the shoreline will be here. So depending upon the movement of water, shoreline also changes. So coast, so this is the coastal region, this is the cliff, so immediately behind this zone is called coastal zone. So this zone is called backshore, but between the backshore and offshore is towards the sea. So between the backshore and offshore, this zone is called foreshore. And the high tide water reaches up to here till the coastal bench. So the cliff basin. This is the cliff basin up to here. The high tide water reaches, but low tide water reaches just below that. Shore zone, it is divided into three types. These are back shore, so this is the beach zone, and starting from the limit of frequent storm waves to the cliff base, and foreshore and extends from the low tide water to the high tide water, whereas offshore it is towards the sea and it is the zone of shallow bottom of the continental slope. Erosional processes, so these are coastal lands and backshore zones are eroded by the action of sea waves and currents through the process of hydraulic action. So the hydraulic action, so the water which is falling on the coastal rocks, so it suppose if any joints are there in the rocks, then what happens is, so it just breaks the rocks into pieces, so by the hydraulic action. So water action, by the water action. And abrasion, so this is a process of abrasion or removal. So the rocks are removed, and so depending upon the size of the rocks, they are taken back towards the sea because of the water action. And attrition, here suppose a large size materials, sand matter is there, or whatever clay matter, whatever is there, so near this coastal region. So because of their action, so each other these materials strike against each other and becomes very small, and they are washed away by the backwash of the seawater. And solution, so this is dissolution of the carbonate rocks which are there in the coastal region. And water pressure, so water pressure is high, so it also helps in the hydraulic action of the seawater. Factors affect coastal erosion are wavelength. So the wavelength is high, suppose the wavelength is high, and the energy also is going to be high, and wave velocity is more, then the energy also is going to be more than wave frequency. Suppose wave frequency is more, then wavelength is going to be less. But so that also affects the coastal erosion. And wave period, so this is the time taken for a particular wave to reach a particular point. So all these factors affects the coastal erosion. And structure and composition of coastal land, and this also affects the coastal erosion. And availability of erosional tools and duration of erosion, so all these factors affect the coastal erosion. Erosional landforms, erosional and solutional process of sea waves and currents form various landforms. These are cliffs, caves, stacks and wave cut platforms. So these are erosional landforms of seawater. First one is cliff. So this is the cliff. So this is a cliff. So this is a this is just as a vertical steep landforms. It is steep, like vertically it is cut down. So suppose it can in this region it can be aerial because of the aerial erosion, or by the wind process. By the wind process also, suppose the rocks are weak here, wind process, or the sea water itself eroded this material from here top to down. So and this base region, sometimes it can and the top region it can occur due to air or seawater itself, but at the bottom it is mainly due to the seawater. So all these actions, the water movements, so because the erosional process, this steep landform occurs, these are called cliffs. So these are very steep rocky coasts rising almost vertically above the seawater, and the height and steepness of the cliff varies along depending upon the lithology of the rock structure. Suppose the rock structure, suppose here it is a stable or hard rocks, whereas here it is a soft rock which can be easily eroded, but it can't be eroded. So the position changes like this. Suppose the position also like changes like this, suppose because of the hard rock here and the soft rock here, like that. So depending upon that, the cliff's position and the shape also changes. And marine erosion and subaerial erosion can form different types of cliffs, like a resistant cliff. Resistant cliff at the top it can have hard rocks, and at the bottom it can have soft rocks. Then weak cliffs, the entire rock structure are weak, so then it causes a weak cliffs. And composite cliffs, so composite cliffs is made up of so different zones of hard rock and soft rocks. In that case, the composite and complex cliffs are formed. Wave cut platforms, so wave cut platforms, these are also called benches, wave cut benches. So here it is, this cliff, this is a vertical steep cliff, whereas here a bench like structure is formed because this zone is a hard rock zone, so which can't be easily eroded. So this forms a bench like structure, but this zone is eroded easily. So this is called a wave cut platforms. These are rocket narrow flat surfaces formed at the base of the cliffs and formed due to cliff recession through powerful erosion of cliff base by backwash of breakers. And this is also called wave cut benches. It is divided into three zones: mesolittoral, supralittoral, and sublittoral zones. So these wave cut platforms are divided into mesolittoral, supralittoral, and sublittoral zones. So next one is sea caves and unassociated features. So sea caves are formed along the coast due to the gradual erosion of weak and strongly jointed rocks by the uprushing surf currents. So because of the uprushing surf currents in the regions where there is a weak and strongly jointed rocks. So if suppose it's a porous rocks, it can collapse the entire structure. But if it is a jointed rock, so it can erode the joints easily, and in that case it forms caves. And the joints widen and form large cavities, and these further enlarge due to erosion and develop into caves, mostly formed in the limestone region. And chimneys on natural holes, they are formed on the top of the caves when a powerful storm waves hit the cave, which breaks open the roof of the cave, and thus water escapes through it. These are isolated remnant of headland projecting well above the sea level. So in this image we can see here these are caves because suppose a joint was there. In this jointed region the seawater enters like this, enters and forms a cave like structure due to continuous erosion of the seawater. So these suppose the entire region is suppose entire region, this region or all these regions are eroded, and suppose if isolated remnant is left, then we call it as a stack. Whereas suppose this region is eroded, through the cave water is entering with a high pressure, and if break opens at the top, suppose top and the water is escaping through that, then it is called. See in this image we can see that it is entering through the cave, and it is open, it made an opening in the top, and the water comes out through this like a chimney. So that's why I call chimneys or natural holes. Depositional landforms, deposition of materials on the coast by the sea wave occurs. So when the waves lose energy and if the sediment load is more, if wave doesn't lose energy, it erodes and it takes the materials which are there in the sea coastal region, it takes back to the sea. If the waves lose energy at the coastal region, and it deposits the sediments there. So this is also depending upon the sedimentary load. So significant land depositional features are beaches, bars, barriers, spits, coastal wetlands, and subka, etc. So beaches, these are a landform alongside a body of water which consists of loose rock particles like sand, shingles and cobble. So these are deposit when the water is coming. So it erodes the material which are there in the, suppose in the coral, suppose islands are there, or some land zones are there in the sea. So these some rocks and which are eroded, and these sand like materials are brought towards the sea. Here it loses the energy and deposits in the coastal zone and forms beaches deposited by breaker waves between high tide and low tide water. So this is the low tide water and this is the high tide water. So between this zone the deposition occurs. Source of materials, so erosion of cliffs, headland, river sediments, all these are eroded and these sediments are brought here and sedimented here. And progradation, suppose regular rise in the width of the beaches. If the width of the beaches increases, then it is called as, if it increases it is called progradation. Suppose the width of the beaches decreases, then it is called retrogradation. Elements of beach, so upper beach, lower beach. So these upper beach is landward section of the beach consisting of coarser, larger material. So suppose this is the land, suppose here the water is coming like this. This is the seaward section of the beach, that will be called as lower beach. This is the upper beach, which is the landward section. Suppose this is the landward, this is the seaward section of the beach, this is called upper beach. So here the coarser, here the materials deposit coarser, larger material. Slope gradient will be around 10 to 20 degrees, whereas lower beach, it is a seaward section of the beach and composed of sands. Slope is less than 2 degree. Beach ridge, it is a wave deposited ridge running parallel to the shoreline. Suppose this is a shoreline, so a ridge like structures are formed, so it is deposited parallel to the shoreline. Types of beaches, it can be sand beach, shingle beach, boulder beach, depending upon the size of the grains. Sand beach will have a size sand grain size of 0.5 to 2 millimeter. Shingle beach will have the grain size of 200 to 100 millimeter, whereas boulder beach will be, the size of the grains will be more than 100 millimeters. Bars, barriers and spits, so these are depositional features. Bars, so suppose here deposition, the sea waves are coming towards the coastal region like this, and they are bringing sediments along with that. These sediments are deposited. See here a large deposition has taken place. This is, suppose this is parallel to the, suppose this is the shoreline, just parallel to that. So parallel to the deposition has happened, but it's a large in structure, then it is called a barriers or barrier islands are formed. But smaller than barrier island, that structures are called bars. So smaller than this, then suppose a smaller structure, then it will be called as bars. Whereas sand spit, which will, the one end will be towards the coastal landward region, the other end will be projecting towards the sea, that is called sand spits. So bars are formed by sea waves through sedimentation parallel to the shoreline as ridges or mounds of seas. Barriers, so these are larger forms of bars. Formation starts with the development of shoals due to deposition of sands. Spits, one end of the sandbar is attached to the land and the other end is projecting towards the sea. Coastal wetlands, so these are flat and rolling marshy lands developed in the coastal areas of humid tropics. So the wherever the wherever the rainfall is more as well as the temperature is more in this humid tropical region, so such kind of marshy landforms are developed because of the deposition. So coastal, in the coastal region, and absence of reliefs, because here the relief beaches are absent, and the stagnant saline water in the significant, these are the significant feature of this coastal wetlands. And sediments are fine and mangroves grow very well in this wetlands. Though it is a saline water, these mangroves have adaptability to grow in this saline water. So here mangroves grow very well, and these mangroves also helps in the prevention of floods in this region. So next one is subka. Subka is also called as salt flats. So subka occurs in the wherever the high temperature zone is there in that region, and the arid region. So in the arid region it occurs. The high temperature also is high, and it is also arid region, and the rainfall also is poor in this region. In this region subka occurs. So formed by deposition of seawater in flat coastal areas in the dry tropical zones. These coastal lands are barren. So here the vegetation also is poor in this region, and so because of that deposition of salt occurs on the coastal land as the seawater evaporates due to high temperature. So suppose the seawater flows like this and it is deposited here, and whereas the temperature is high, so the water, whatever seawater is there, the water will evaporate, the salts will remain like this and forms the salt flats.